15th principle on how to 10 times your business, which is courage. We were just out on Osprey Reef seeing these incredible sharks, and this was part of the Mike Ball expeditions. We were out there for 4 days, and we were part of something which is called the Global Shark Diving Network. And the whole focus here was about the purpose of being able to preserve sharks. So if you remember the very last of the episodes that we had, it was all about how to go about finding your purpose. And now that we're out here, you can see the moment you follow your purpose, it allows you to actually have a whole different level of courage as well. And that doesn't actually mean that you're out there trying to achieve that by taking crazy risks. As you can see here, like the way that we were actually out there with the sharks is just by diving, like anything that's an extreme sport, like jumping out of a plane, going into the deep ocean. It actually are people who have courage, but it's courage with lots of safety measures in place as well. So real courage is when you're actually willing to go on a courageous journey, something that others would think is risky, but where you're taking risk as the reaction to incomplete or summary knowledge. The more you can actually get clarity on what the risks are going to be, you can minimize those risks, and then you can really experience real courage. So when we were out there, we actually saw these sharks going through a shark feed, and this was a way for them to be able to bring all the sharks together, get us to have a chance to see the sharks, for them to check out all the sharks as well, and at the same time be able to report back on how sharks are doing to all of the other members of the network as well, all around the world. And the good news is that the sharks are thriving here on the Great Barrier Reef, despite all the overfishing that's taking place. If you haven't done the purpose test, go do that, because it may be that, like, life under the sea is your number one purpose. In my case, it's a huge passion of mine, and I have been scuba diving for a long time. And for me, a huge part of this is what can we do to actually go about saving the animals in the ocean. And like, if we actually just take a step back and say, well, like, we went through all these different safety checks and so on before we went down there to see all the different sharks. If you were to actually think the same about your business and say, well, to what extent are you going through those safety checks, or to what extent are you actually setting yourself up to actually be able to come from the heart, which is where the word courage comes from, right? So if you actually start with that thought process, which is like, right, I don't want to be the one that's constantly coming from my mind. I want to come from the heart. So I'll set it up where I'm actually already set up for success. I want to give you a good example of this, right? Richard Branson. When Richard Branson first started his first airline, a lot of people were like, well, that's really courageous, or maybe it's just really risky. Whereas for him, he didn't see it that way, because he made sure that with his very first flight, he had rented the plane, so if he had to give it back, he could give it back. He had already figured out how he could actually make money from it by booking the seats beforehand, paying for it afterwards. And similarly, when he was in the early 1990s trying to figure out how to upgrade his airlines, and he had this kind of challenge that he needed $10 million to put little TVs on the back of every seat. This was in the very early days when they were doing that. And he didn't have the money to do that, but all of his competitors were doing it. He ended up phoning up the head of Boeing and said, hey, would you be okay if I was to actually help you solve one of your problems in order for you to help me solve one of mine? And he says, well, what's our problem? He says, well, it's because no one was actually ordering planes at the time. Why don't I book a whole bunch of new planes with you? And he goes, well, that would be really nice if you do that. He says, well, in return, all I'm asking is that you just put these little TVs on the back of every seat on my existing fleet. And so, of course, it was like, deal was done. And he ended up getting those 10 million TVs for free. The whole idea that if you start to serve someone else in what they need, if you start planning for what's the worst that could happen, is that actually you're still in a good place, so that even if you feel like you're taking a risk, it's not one you're going to regret, and you've actually effectively minimized that risk before you've even taken it. To me, that's true courage. It allows you to then actually go out and do the things that a lot of people wouldn't even consider doing because they never minimized the risk in the first place, whereas for you can go out there and live that courageous life. So I wanted to share that as like a really important part going forward. You do not need to have high reward equals high risk. You can always find a way to minimize that risk and then deliver a reward, not just for yourself, but for everyone else that you're working with as well. And we'll be coming back to that thought as we move forward. Remember, at the end of the day, it's not about how risky your vehicle is, it's about how risky you are, which is your ability to be able to now start transforming the way you start thinking about every journey you go on and making sure that you're actually minimizing that risk before you begin. All right, I will see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed the little images that I shot underwater on my little GoPro, and we will catch up with you on the next episode of Entrepreneur TV.